Before the main part of the podcast, I'd like to give a big shout out to Happiful Magazine, who have sponsored me to go on to their mental health first aid course for adults, which is a 2-day course. I'm looking forward to doing that later this month, which is July 2018, and I shall do a special review episode once I have completed that. Becky has completed the mental health first aid course for young people, so we can talk about that one as well at the same time. And we are hoping to do some more work with Happiful Magazine. And just in case you have not heard of them before, Happiful Magazine is a monthly publication with their mission to create a healthier, happier and more sustainable society. They aim to provide informative, inspiring and topical stories about mental health and well-being. They want to break the stigma of mental health in society, just like we do, and to shine a light on the positivity and support that should be available for everyone, no matter their situation, which is extremely important. No matter your situation, you should be able to get the help that you need. There's also a free e-magazine, and you can also buy hard copies, and you can find this information out on their website, and their website is happiful.com. And I'm going to make sure that I have a link in the show notes for you. And I'm hoping that this is going to be a fantastic new relationship that will have some more exciting things coming up in the near future. We're also taking part in the 13th Annual Podcast Awards, where you can nominate the Mental Health Book Club podcast. If you haven't done so already, please consider going over and voting for us. All you need to do is head over to podcastawards.com. Again, I'll put a link in the show notes for you, and just nominate us under the People's Choice Awards and the health category. We also now have a range of merchandise, which includes t-shirts, tote bags and mugs, just to name a few. Again, you can find this on our website, so head over to mentalhealthbookclub.com and there is a link to our new shop. And finally, you now can find us over on Patreon, where you can sponsor the podcast with as little as $2 a month. And that will allow you to get early access to full episodes, because I've now cut them into 2 half-hour episodes. You will also get special material that we will put out from time to time, and you also get some additional benefits such as being entered into book giveaways and those kind of things. We only have a couple of supporters at the moment, but we are extremely thankful for their support, and when we reach our targets of $200 a month, which I do think is a little optimistic on our behalf. However, I'm going to keep trying. We will give a proportion, so $50 of your monthly donations to Mind each month. Hello and welcome to the Mental Health Book Club podcast with your hosts Sydney Timmins and Becky Lawrence. We would like to take this opportunity to let you know that we will be covering a diverse range of mental health topics that may be distressing to some listeners. You can find a full list of the topics being covered in each episode in the show notes. Please check the show notes before listening to any of our episodes. Welcome to the Mental Health Book Club podcast with your hosts Sydney Timmins and
Becky Lawrence.
And today we are going to be reading A Tiny Piece of Something Greater by Jude Sierra.
This book has a 4-star review on amazon.co.uk from 1 review. It has a 4.5 stars on amazon.com from 10 reviews. And on Goodreads it has 45 ratings, making it a 4.13 stars. Sydney gave this 5 stars and I gave this 4.
So yes, I was pleasantly surprised by this book, I have to say. So when I opened it and started reading it, my heart did fall. So I'm being completely honest here. I did go, oh, not another love story.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised because it wasn't the same as other love stories.
It wasn't Love is Going to Save You.
It wasn't that at all. And I think it definitely dealt with real issues associated with having a mental health issue and a new relationship. And I think that is probably what swung it for me to give 5 stars.
I thought it was really raw at times in the way that it describes what's going on and the feelings that are happening. And it actually takes the both perspectives as well, not just Reed, who is the person with the mental health diagnosis, but also Joaquim and how he actually comes to terms with it and deals with it himself and relates to Reed as Reed, but also Reed and his mental health issue. And there is a distinction, and he makes sure I thought it was really good how Joaquim does say, but I like you all the time. He goes to, I'm still here because I like you. I thought
That's
that was
nice.
really sweet.
It was.
So, Reed Watsford has a lot of secrets and a past he can't quite escape. While staying at his grandmother's condo in Key Largo, he signs up for introductory dive classes where he meets Joaquim Oliveira, a Brazilian dive instructor with wanderlust. Driven by an instant magnetic pull that could have been a hookup quickly deepens. As their relationship evolves, they must learn to navigate the challenges of Reed's mental illness on their own and with each other. And I do apologise if we are not pronouncing Joaquim or Olivia properly. We apologise. It is Brazilian.
And we are very, very English, unfortunately, because I don't know about you, but I went to Peru recently. You might have seen some of the photos up, but I can't roll my R's.
No,
I'm really rubbish at pronunciation. So we will hopefully, when we get Jude on the podcast, fingers crossed, that she'll be able to tell us the correct pronunciation of Joaquim's name.
Yeah. So in the story, Reed has a diagnosis of cyclothymia as well as a history of self-harm, and he tried to take his own life with suicide in the past.
Yeah, so before he gets to his grandma's condo, this is why in some ways he is there. He is kind of trying to start his life again, away from the problem is
the bad influences.
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily the bad influences, but it's also the high super vigil parents that are going to be watching him like a hawk. And I think that's probably a huge thing associated with people with mental illness and mental ill health, is the fact that if they've had this one episode, then they are often finding that family members and friends who are probably got their best interest at heart are just extra vigilant at identifying when something is going on and asking questions, and just kind of, I don't know if it's patronising, but it kind of puts on additional pressure, doesn't it?
He finds it's them expecting the worst of him all the time. So when his family ask him, how are you doing, he takes that as kind of a what's going wrong at the moment.
Yeah, and he's like, well, nothing, I'm fine. And also when he says he's fine, them not necessarily believing that he's fine.
Yeah. I think it's also the expectation that somehow he's going to get better, which often is with mental health issues, is that people ask you, oh, are you better now?
And no, that just doesn't work like that. It's not the same as physical health. So for those of you that don't necessarily know what cyclothymia is, it's actually one of the lesser diagnosed mental health conditions. It is similar to bipolar, but it is at a lesser extent, which is probably one of the reasons why it's not diagnosed as much. So you still have periods of depression and you have periods of hypomania to mania, but it's to a lesser extent. And it's more chronic, usually, than bipolar affective disorder.
And what does that mean, that it's more chronic?
So it lasts a lot longer. So these episodes or these periods of depression and hypomania/mania are longer or are happening over a longer period of time.
Okay. And actually in the book, I found it interesting where Reed tries to describe it and actually says how these cycles can happen within hours, within a day, within weeks. You know, he can go from one to the other. And I think that's one of the things that Joaquim finds quite difficult because it's unpredictable.
It is. And I guess in some ways that's the nature of all mental health issues to some degree, is that they are unpredictable and could crop up at any time.
Yeah.
So quoting from the book, it says that it's a mood disorder like bipolar. Instead of experiencing some of the more visibly disruptive aspects of bipolar, such as mania, my moods are subtler, or they were. And so when he talks about the mania and the depression, he goes, I get depressed or hypomanic, which is like a stage below mania. Really energetic, productive. Lots of people experience increased creativity. With me, I feel really outgoing, like I can get so much done. My mind goes and goes and goes. But it's not bad. I don't mind that part. I actually like it. Really, Joaquim says, not the impulsive part, no, but I like feeling productive. The thing is, they say this is milder than being bipolar, right? Only with cyclothymia, your moods switch. It's different for different people. For me, my moods can cycle quickly, even as much as a few times in one day. I'll go from depressed to hypomanic, and then in between. And I think it's really good that the book also describes the fact that you can be both at the same time, so both depressed and hypomanic, which is called a mixed episode or mixed state. And we are going to be speaking to the secret psychiatrist specifically about cyclothymia.
I really like the way that this book portrays the relationship that's forming between Reed and Joachim. I like the way that it's messy, that it's raw, and how it's set up. They're not sure what's going on. Neither of them know where it's going. And it's quite nice to see that play out.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And also the age-old dilemma of at what point do you tell someone that you are potentially interested in dating that you have a mental health condition, and that may impact the way that you interact with them. Particularly because in the first instance, you start to see that Joachim is he finds it very difficult to handle the mood swings, and the 1 minute he's all good and the next minute something has set him off and triggered him, and his mood changes quite drastically. And I think the relationship between Joachim's sister and himself is really nice, as a nice way for you to find out a bit more about his thoughts and feelings about the situation.
Yeah.
Because he does notice it to begin with, and he does seek advice from his sister, and his sister, I think, is fantastic as a side
really
character.
She's really non-judgmental.
Exactly.
She tells him to go back to, well, what do you like about him, and actually, what does it mean? What, have you asked questions? Have you done any research? Kind of really tells him to be informative about it. Because actually, what I think's really nice is that Joachim isn't scared by this, but Reed's scared to tell him because...
Which is fair enough,
yeah.
Because I would probably be feeling exactly the same. I mean, we've had discussions, haven't we, before about at what point would you tell someone that you have fibromyalgia?
Yeah.
And at what point, if I was dating, would I tell someone that I have multiple sclerosis?
Yeah.
And also on top of that, at what point would I say, oh yeah, by the way, I have BPD?
Yeah.
It's a difficult one to identify, and because you are worried that you're going to frighten someone off.
But then you also don't want to get too into it before you
realise, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be abandoned by this person, because you start to invest your feelings in the other person, and they go, I'm sorry, but I can't handle your diagnosis, and they leave.
Yeah. I actually think Joachim is confused by the mood swings, but once he finds out the reasoning behind it, he's much more accepting and actually is able to discuss and able to ask questions.
And I think that's probably a key thing, isn't it? If you are entering into any kind of relationship, having open communication between the two of you always helps.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the main things that you need for a strong foundation in a relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, Joachim's really patient as well, because he says, you don't have to talk about anything unless you're ready. If it's too much, just tell me. And sometimes you can tell that Joachim really wants to know stuff, but
he holds back a bit in some situations.
And Reed says, look, Count, is that enough for today? And then he accepts that and just goes, yep, no, that's fine. And I think that is really important, that he is patient with Reed to allow him to open up and explain and talk about what's happened,
particularly in his own time. Yeah. Because I think otherwise you do, as a person with mental health condition, feel like you're being pressurised to open up about everything in one go. And it can be, in many cases, very triggering to be able to get this all out.
You're talking about the events that actually cause you to feel a lot worse. And so you've got to get to a place where you feel strong enough to approach those ideas and those memories and things like that. I know in watching 13 Reasons Why, one of the other, in season 2, spoiler alert, another student tries to take his own life. And it's not until months later he's able to read the suicide note that he left. And he approaches his parents and said, do you have it? And I said, of course we have, but we didn't want to give it to you until you're ready and until you've spoken to your counsellor about reading it, and you do it in a safe environment where you can actually deal with what you were going through.
Yeah, and also he hides his self-harming as well from Joachim. And I do understand why you would do that, because I've been there. I hid it from everyone. I did it in a place that no one can see. I must admit, when you hear the description, he mainly cuts along his ribs and under his shirt.
Yeah. And
ouch. Yeah. Isn't that quite a sensitive area in itself? And you go, oh my goodness, that's going to be a little on the tender side.
Yeah.
But the scars, again, Joachim isn't scared of those scars, and he accepts them, even though he's sad on the inside that Reed has felt that he needed to inflict injury on himself, and he doesn't fully understand, because I don't think, unless you have been in that situation where you have self-harmed, you're never really going to understand the reasons behind it. But again, he's very accepting.
And he wants to know all the stories. He says, you know, each of these is a story that at some point when you're ready, I'd love to hear. And he wants to ask him about every single one. And he realises when he touches him, he purposely moves off. He doesn't like really explore those scars because he doesn't want to trigger Reed. He doesn't want Reed to think that he is ashamed, or he is actually very conscious of how he behaves, which I think is really sweet.
I do too. And I think it, in some ways, it starts to show you that there are accepting people out there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think it helps in reducing that stigma, because if everyone could react like Joaquin has, I mean, how much better would life be for people that are suffering?
Yeah. And I mean, they do have an argument, and they do, you know.
That's life. Yeah. That's relationships.
Yeah. And then, but actually, Joaquin speaks to his sister, talks him down. She starts putting maybe Reed's point of view across. And then when they regroup and they talk again, and again, communication.
Yeah.
Taking the time out to break and to understand and to cool off, and then having that communication was so important. And yet they're such young characters. They're enjoying life. Joaquin is described as having wanderlust, you know. Yeah. He's traveling, he's learning to dive, or he is a diving instructor. He
loves diving. Yeah. It's like a top thing. And I don't know, the
running joke that he's always got a pair of swimming trunks on him.
Yeah, that was funny. That made me chuckle.
Whereas Reed, he wears that swimming t-shirt, partly because he says the sun and that kind of thing, but actually it's because the scarring. And he says that you can't expose it to too much sun with a scarring because it can make it worse and stuff. So once he explains it, I think Joaquin is really understanding and really supportive. I like him as a character.
Me too. The issue that seems to come up that has really caused the major conflict between them, again, this is a spoiler alert for the book, is the fact that Joaquin hasn't necessarily got a job in the US. He is an intern at this dive shop, and there isn't necessarily a position for him once he has finished his internship.
Yeah.
And so that means, what is he going to do next? And yes, he is in a relatively new relationship, but it does cause a trigger for Reed, because he does turn around and he goes, well, I don't know, I can do anything. The world is my oyster. And
Reed is suddenly, alarm bells go off. He's scared. He's worried. He's getting closer to this person who might leave him. And especially as Reed's character is very controlled. Not controlling, but in a controlled way, as in he likes a clean house. He likes to have order. He likes to fold his clothes and have them in the right place at the right time. And this is partly because he says it helps him. It helps sort his brain out and help him to deal with. And it's a coping mechanism for his mental health issue.
Yeah. And so I think that's probably that. Is it a breakdown in communication? I don't know. I don't think it was necessarily something that they had even thought about or discussed.
Well, I think
it was just an off the cuff.
I think it was two people
comment, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was two people approaching something in a different way. So one coming into life, living in the moment, never really planning out a future, whereas the other is coming into it as trying to plan out every moment because it helps them to keep calm. And so it was just kind of seeing life from the other's perspective rather than anything else. Because we don't all see life the same way. Some people do need that. Some people do need that long plan and that, security.
Yeah, and it's a sense of Reed being secure because he feels that perhaps everyone in his life has let him down and abandoned him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't necessarily want this to happen.
I think it also, Reed's worried it means that he's more into this than Joaquin, because Joaquin's kind of off the fly comment means that, well, he's happy to flit off somewhere else if he needs to. Whereas actually, when Joaquin talks to him, he says, no, I always planned on having you there, whatever I do, and even touching base or doing something to make sure that they stayed in contact, but didn't expressed it as actually, I'm taking off when I fancy it. So Reed actually was maybe took it in a different way to how Joaquin meant it as well.
But you can certainly understand how someone could take it in the wrong way. And I think that is, again, something that I find extremely important is the use of other people's language and that interpretation. And I am so quick to jump to the wrong conclusion or a different interpretation than someone else may have. And I think that is...
I think we all are. I think we all understand things. I mean, I was talking to you recently about how people use the word actually. And I'd recommended garage to my brother who needed a new car. And
they're actually all right.
Yeah, they're actually okay. And that made me feel, oh, so you were expecting them to be bad because you don't expect my opinion to actually be a good opinion. And they didn't mean it that way. They just mean it actually... It was really nice.
You don't necessarily know that they didn't mean it that way. They could have. You never know.
But
if you take a step back, if you take a step back and you look at it from a logical point of view, it might just be something that they say quite a lot. Is actually that was good. Actually, that was all right. Actually.
Yes.
So,
whereas I had taken it as, oh, you don't actually trust my opinion. And once you saw it for yourself, you realised my opinion was okay.
Yeah. It's a bit like the surprise thing that I said about Lawrence when he said, I'm surprised this is so good.
Yeah.
Again, it's that use of language. And you're like, well, what?
That sounds to you like a criticism that actually... Everyone's expectation was lower. Yeah.
And to be fair, everything is a criticism in my eyes.
Well, that's the thing. It's that point of view. He never meant it in that way. He was just...
Being Lawrence?
Yeah. Yeah. But probably because as well, he'd never seen you... It was about something you'd written and he'd never seen you write fiction. None of us had.
Lots of.
Yeah. And so maybe it was actually that you didn't have an expectation...
And I beat that. Yeah, see, it's
rather than
difficult,
actually because he had a low expectation. It's hard. It's hard to...
This is when mindfulness kicks in and you have to take a step back and you go, okay,
and actually, does it matter? At the end of the day, my brother bought a car. You wrote a book.
Well, I haven't written it yet. I'm still in the process. But
no, I know.
You know what I mean.
Yeah. So I definitely think this book shows how communication is so important between even a brand new
relationship.
Couple. Yeah. I also like the way that Joaquin gets a bit worried at one point because they've had sexual relations and it got a bit, not violent, but, a little pain involved.
Yeah.
And he was suddenly afterwards...
Because he'd learnt about the diagnosis.
Yeah, and the self-harming.
Yeah.
And so afterwards kind of went, oh, well, wait a minute, is that...
A bit of rough is actually a substitute for self-harm.
Yeah, and he's worried and concerned, but actually when he talks to...
Read about it.
Yeah.
And again, go communication. So if you could see me now, I'm doing a little fist pump in the air.
Boop, boop.
So yeah, the communication, when they talk about it, it actually turns out that isn't the case. It's just that's...
We're saying actually a lot now since we've
it's your fault.
Pointed it out.
It's your fault.
But yeah, it is. He then says, Reed says, look, when it comes to sex, that pain is different.
Yeah.
And that pain is part of the relationship that is literally kind of, circled around that sexual relationship. Whereas the self-harm is
a different topic.
Yeah, and a different pain, he says. And recently I've read about how we have a limited language when it comes to emotions. And Natasha Devon talks about how we have very few words to describe things like anger and pain and things like that. So he probably is limited by the language. Pain is pain, but actually we do feel pain in different ways. When you scratch yourself, it's a different pain to if you were stabbed, for example. And it's not just about intensity, being stabbed or being scratched or being burnt. Yeah. All of it has a different feeling to it, but yet we call it pain. And I think that Natasha brings this up and says in a lot of other languages, they have a lot more words for these things. And we are limited by that. So sometimes the communication between two people can be limited because of the language that we don't have.
Yeah.
Which I found really interesting, but means that you have to kind of describe things in a bit more detail.
It's a burning pain, or it's a stabbing pain, or it's a...
Well, the doctors
all pain,
do ask you these things. Yeah, like I'm a chronic pain sufferer, so a bit of a private expert in it.
In pain, all things pain.
Pain is my game, but it is kind of... There are different pains that I feel on different times at different places.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Book Club podcast. If you need additional help with your mental health, please contact the Samaritans on 116 123, which is a 24-hour helpline. And if you need additional information about mental health issues, please visit Mind at mind.org.uk.
Our next episode with The Secret Psychiatrist will be about maintaining your mental health. And our next book will be A Tiny Piece of Something Greater by Jude Sierra.
If you'd like to find out more about the MHBC podcast, please visit our website, mentalhealthbookclub.com. We really hope that you enjoy this podcast, and we would like to hear what you think. Please head over to Twitter and follow us at MHBC_podcast, or head over to Facebook and follow our Facebook page, which is Mental Health Book Club. If you would like to show your support further, please share us with your family and friends and leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts.